Okay, let's try 2 examples using the 2 postulates we just learned. Example number 1. I have 2 triangles. Triangle ABC, triangle DEF. And we see markings on here that show that angle C is congruent to angle E, angle B is congruent to angle F, and then side BC is congruent to side EF. And because we see that there are 2 angles that each triangle is congruent to, and a side that's included, the theorem or the postulate that we're going to use to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent is angle, side, angle. So I'm going to write down the corresponding parts, and then I'm going to write down the congruence statement. Angle C is congruent to angle E. Side BC is congruent to side EF. And angle B is congruent to angle F. And because of angle, side, angle, we know that triangle, and I'm going to make sure to match up the corresponding parts. So triangle CBA is congruent to triangle EFD. Okay, next example. Example number 2. We have 2 triangles here that share a vertice. This is triangle EFG and triangle GHJ. And according to our markings, angle E is congruent to angle J, and side EF is congruent to side HJ. So far we have an angle, or 2 angles right here that are congruent to each other, and 2 sides that are congruent to each other, and we need to have one piece of information that allows us to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent to each other. What we notice here is that angle EGF is congruent to HGJ because they are vertical angles. So we have 2 angles now, or 2 pairs of angles, excuse me, that are congruent to each other, and a side that's congruent to each other that's not included between the 2 angles. So the postulate that we would use then to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent is angle, angle, side. I'm going to go ahead and write down the corresponding parts again, and then write down the congruent statement. Angle E, according to the diagram, is congruent to angle J. And angle EGF is congruent to angle HGJ. And this is because they're vertical angles. And remember, we learned vertical angles are congruent. And then we see that side EF is congruent to side HJ. Okay, so this is an angle. This is a pair of angles that are congruent. And this is a side. So by AAS, triangle, and again I'm going to try to match up the corresponding parts, E, G, F, is congruent to triangle JGH. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture, and go ahead and do the corresponding homework in your homework packet.